You know, Jay, there's nothing quite like a practical and dependable utility car for a country house.
Exactly. Well, you know, this just makes people laugh. Even the most dour New Englander, hey, they start waving when they see this thing. You know, you see Ethan Frome walk along Bellevue here, and suddenly, hey, I like that car. You know, it just makes people smile. It's the right color. You feel like Marcel Marcian is driving this thing. You know?
Absolutely, Marcello Mastroianni. We're on the Positano coastline.
That's right.
Except we're here in New England, strangely enough.
That's right. I am not Marcel, and you are not Sophia Loren. So that's pretty much the end of that.
How tragic.
Yeah.
Absolutely tragic. But, you know, the thing is that the 1959 Fiat 600 Jolly that we're driving is the perfect Newport car. Because what does Newport represent? It represents relaxation, leisure, and at the top level.
Right,
you know?
right.
And what signifies sort of endless wealth more than taking a practical utility car and turning it into a completely, slightly useless toy?
Well, you know, the funny thing is, though, I was thinking just the opposite. It's the kind of car that any person who has any sort of job could relatively afford at the time and have fun, and you couldn't tell you from... You know, this reminds me of how in England, when the Mini came out, the Beatles bought one, Twiggy bought one, the local guy who owned the little pub bought one, school teachers bought... They were classless. I mean, or, you know, they defined all...
They defied class.
Yeah. So to me, I see it as sort of the opposite, whereas if someone was right behind me in a Rolls Royce, everyone would be looking at this. Well, let's explain exactly what we have here. They start with a standard 600 Fiat, right?
Correct.
What are we looking at? About 26, 28 horsepower?
28 horsepower from the 633 cubic centimeter inline 4.
Right.
And
water cooled or air cooled?
Water cooled.
Yeah.
And 4-speed manual transmission with synchro on 2, 3, and 4. And talking about the idea of a people's car, which of course the 600 or Seicento as they call it in Italy certainly was, but this is taking, to your point about bridging classes, this vehicle sent to Carrozzeria Ghia for this custom open coachwork cost twice what the most expensive Seicento cost. So this was the people's car rendered a really expensive object.
Yes, but someone who bought a second-hand Fiat could convert it to this reasonably easy, couldn't they?
Well, and there have been recently some conversions, because these cars are so valuable now, conversions of plain Fiat 600 sedans into Jollies. But at the time they were built, Carrozzeria Ghia did all of this by hand, and it was extremely expensive.
You know, it's interesting, you called it the people's car, and Germany seems to claim that for the Volkswagen. But the Volkswagen didn't come out until after World War II. Fiat started in 35, 36 with the Topolino.
Exactly.
And they made something like 600,000 of them before Volkswagen even showed up. So these really were the original people's car. 4 cylinders, enough horsepower to get you from point A to point B. Cost virtually nothing to run. So this should be the people's car and not Hitler's little idea there, you know?
100%. I know that you and I both are great admirers of Dante Giacosa, who designed the Topolino, and this car, and the later Nuova Cinquecento, which was a 2-cylinder version based on this platform, so an even more economical car.
Yeah, but most people know the Fiat, when you say it, it's like you're ordering off the appetizer menu at an Italian restaurant. People go, what does he say? He said, it's a Fiat.
Are you on the Calamari or the Cinquecento?
I love how you literally slide out of the car. What we're sitting on are basket weave seats, basically. They're rattan. Is that
exactly? Yes.
Yeah.
They're wicker, woven, basket weave seats, and
then shellacked. So
to make them practical. This is a beach car. It's a car that you kept at your mooring when you got off your yacht, and you're going to drive around Cortina or Catalina. You would get into your Seicento Jolly and drive around. And in your wet swimsuits, you didn't want cloth upholstery to be ruined in that. So, you know, it's a very practical thing. And of course, the lack of doors makes it, again, more of an alfresco experience. We've got this wonderful Surrey top on top, which adds to the feeling, but, you know, protects you against the sun, but still gives you that beachy feeling. That's what
Right,
you want in this
right.
car.
Life's a beach, you might say.
Life's a beach because you're in your Seicento Jolly. And the other thing about this car that is also quite interesting, all Fiat 600s are built with a level of detail that surprise people think about an inexpensive people's car today.
Right.
But you take this car, which of course, as we mentioned before, is a custom-bodied example, and all the wonderful details like the castings for the grab handle. Of course, you know, one of the other things about the minimalism of this car, which I absolutely love about these cars, I had a 1960 Cinquecento, and I had a 1958 Fiat Abarth 750 GT Double Bubble, the ultimate expression of this particular four-cylinder engine. And I love the fact that the car has no tach, of course, but there are indications on the speedometer for maximum speed and gears.
Right, right.
And they are, by any measure, optimistic.
And it's funny when you think about, this is the Italian version. When you look at the German version of this car, which would be the Volkswagen Thing, it looks like a military vehicle, you know. But I mean, you know, the fenders are squared off.
Yeah.
There's no sense of fun. When you talk about the minimalist of this, well, not really. I mean, this grab handle is very expensive.
Exactly.
And of course, so that really, that's an expensive piece. I mean, the dash is nicely laid out. The steering wheel is styled. I mean, it really is so different from what the Germans are doing with the same thing.
I mean, even the that Italian style, even in the toggle switches, with just these plain cast switches, but they have a beautiful design to them. They feel great on the fingers. You know, it's the Italians always think of those little details, which is so wonderful. And we're driving faster than some bicycles. So that's a good thing.
That's the first.
You don't want to go fast in this car. That's the entire point. You know, you just sort of want to enjoy your drive.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun to drive. It really is terrific. You know, it's so funny to me because young people today, or most people today, I guess, really have no idea how much fun a lightweight car can be. I mean, everyone talks about, oh, they're so enamored of the McLaren, there's no power brakes, there's no power steering. This never had any of that because it never had a need for it.
Exactly.
But it moves so effortlessly, and 28 horsepower seems like nothing, but it's actually quite sufficient to get you where you're going because you're not moving that much weight. It's really horsepower per pound. You know, if you can keep your per pound to like 1 horsepower per 5 pound, or whatever it might be, then you're not bad. It's not bad.
It is exactly that. And for me as well, Jay, the fact that power to weight ratio is everything. You can have a car. I remember driving my 1953 Jaguar Mark 7 on a 1,000-mile rally through New England.
Right.
And people were so incredibly impressed. Said, "Oh, you're such a great driver." I said, "I may be a good driver, but the car is a great car.
Right.
And if you use it the way it's intended, you can keep up with modern Porsches and Lamborghinis. It doesn't matter because you use all the performance of the car because of the balance between the weight of the car, the performance of the car,
Right.
and it makes it much easier to use it all.
Right.
You can have 1,000 horsepower, you know, underneath your right foot, but if
Well,
you don't need it,
it's funny how I just drove the new Nissan Z, and it's 400 horsepower, which 20 years ago would have been, oh my God, unbelievable.
Exactly.
But you know something? It's perfect. You can use all the power all the time. It's plenty fast. You can get yourself in trouble with it. I was really impressed with it because, like the Miata, nicely balanced. It's not about horsepower. It's about handling and about weight.
exactly. And this car, of course, fits so well into the incredibly strong theme of today's episode.
Oh yes, what is today's tenuous connection? What house are we going to go see? I'm curious.
We're going to go see a house called Anglesea, and you know, it's very interesting too the way they name houses. This house Anglesea is named
Angle, A-N-G-L?
A-N-G-L-E,
Like an angle?
as an angle, and
Yeah.
S-E-A as in ocean,
Yeah.
because it's on a corner of the cliff walk in Newport, so it is literally on a point of land or an angle in the sea.
Right.
And it's a really interesting example of a home built in a certain style, a very specific style, French Second Empire,
Right.
and then transformed into a slightly different style. Just as this Seicento Jolly was transformed from a utility sedan into a frivolous and luxurious beach cruiser.
Well, that
Transformation.
really is a tenuous connection.
Thank you very much.
I admire your effort to try and connect it. It doesn't matter to me. I always like being surprised by the houses. I just show up in the car and then I see where Donald is taking me. So
I think you'll be very pleased with both this house and the way that it expresses the ocean and the wonderful resort atmosphere of Newport. One of the other great things about the house we're going to see today is its very, very famous neighbor. This house is right across the street, right next door to the Breakers.
oh, right.
Probably the most notable of the Newport cottages.
Right.
And there's another interesting story about this particular house, Anglesea, and transformation, and sort of making sure that, not exactly keeping up with the Joneses or the Vanderbilts in this case, but the way things evolved in order to stay current and at the leading edge.
Yeah, yeah.
Which we will see in the other two cars that we're going to drive today as well. So this tenuous connection will get stronger and stronger as the day progresses today.
Right, right.
Just you wait. So here we are, Jay, at Anglesea.
Okay.
As we discussed before, the name comes from the positioning of the house.
Right.
The house was built in 1880, and the architect was Leno, a fellow who was born in Germany, trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris.
Yeah, right.
And he built it for Walter Lewis, who was a merchant in Philadelphia. And the house was built in the French Second Empire style. And that meant very deep mansard roofs and wonderful decorative carving. Almost Gothic carving, which you can see in the interior of the house in the staircase. However, he sold the house in 1896 to a couple, the Pearsons. And a very interesting thing happened because, of course, in 1895, the Breakers was rebuilt next door from the Peabody and Stearns sort of humble cottage that it was to the grand Richard Morris Hunt mansion that exists there. And in a case of perhaps not keeping up with the Smiths, but keeping up with the Vanderbilts, the Pearsons decided that they needed to have their house updated. And so it was updated in the colonial revival style, which is very popular at the time. And what they did is they took some of the French forms, such as the extreme curvature in the roof and some of the decorations, and stripped those off and put more American decorative motifs, such as the blocks underneath the cornices, which is very typical in a federal house.
Yeah.
So you see that influence. And that carries through the interior of the house as well, where we can see in the main drawing room, we have a mantle and paneling that is very much colonial revival, while the French Second Empire influence really remains in some of the floor decoration and the wonderful staircase.
Well, the thing that amazes me, how we live has not really changed. What we drive, how we get around, that it's all different. But this house is as comfortable today in exactly the same reason it was comfortable in 1880. You know, a lot of time when I see modern houses that have domes and flying buttresses and all that kind of stuff, it's interesting because it's modern, but it seems cold. It doesn't seem comfortable to me. It doesn't seem like where I'd want to live. Whereas this, when you realize well over 100 years old, 150 years old, it's still exactly what I would want in a house, you know?
It also reflects, Jay, our theme, the tenuous connection, if you were.
Yes, what was it again?
Episode, evolution.
Evolution.
The fact that this house started as a French Second Empire house, evolved into a French Second Empire house that now had colonial revival elements. And the interesting thing about this house as well is, you know, Newport in history is wonderful. This house has had 3 owners from the time it was new.
Wow.
The second family, the Pearsons, who bought it in 1896, sold it to the current owners, their family, in 1996.
Wow.
So, and then the current owners embarked on a restoration and expansion plan where they actually added a full wing for a new kitchen and built a new room at the back of the house to take advantage of this wonderful ocean view, all in that same very sensitive way of the style of the house that existed
I mean, the
before.
only way this house is different than it was in 1880 is has electricity, central heating, perhaps air conditioning, but that's really just about it. I mean, the same windows, the same glass area. I mean, all of that really hasn't changed, you know? That's what makes, you know, I have a picture of the Stanley brothers with the inventors of the Stanley steamer in front of their house in 1906 in Newton, Mass. And then I saw a picture of basically the same Stanley in front of the same house, maybe taken 10 years ago. Trees are bigger, different, shrubs are, but the house is exactly the same. Because the way we live has not changed at all.
It's a tribute to the fact that something we try to point out in this series very often is the fact that Newport, especially as a place, lives its history.
Right.
This is a dynamic house which is being enjoyed by the current owners very, very much. And as you said, has been made a very livable place. One of the other very special features about this house, and again, one of the things that people do here in Newport that are very sensitive to the architecture and history, is they take advantage of the site of the house. These houses are very site specific, and they've added this wonderful pavilion just on the edge of the property, at the edge of the sea. It's just absolutely wonderful. You can sit there.
Like that gazebo type.
Exactly, as if you're alone in a universe floating above the sea, and it's something quite special.
I just like each room is individual. I hate flow. I hate houses that the living room flows into. No, I like to be able to shut off each room, because in the old days you had a fireplace in each room, and you could shut off that room and heat that room exclusively if you wanted to. And I sort of like that. I like individual things, you know. I don't like my peas touching the steak, touching the potato. You know, I like room, you know. I don't want it all on one giant flowing. You flow into this room, flow into that room.
Flow is one of those things that also has taken on new meaning.
No, flow is a waitress as far as I'm concerned.
But this is a house that actually flows well. The main entry hall opens onto rooms, the front salon.
Yeah, but individual rooms.
Exactly.
And each room is different.
Exactly.
You walk in, there's a beautiful coffered ceiling in that one, and this one might have a skylight. So you can enjoy different aspects of the house depending on your mood, you know?
Exactly, and all really oriented to this wonderful site. So this is a really terrific house.
Yeah,
and,
it really was something. It was really very special.
And now we'll take a look at another example of evolution, which might not be as obvious as that here in the house, but we'll see, perhaps looking at this Ferrari 360 Modena.
I don't see any evolution. I just like cars. I'm just humoring him. Hey, I see the evolution there.
So Jay, our second car here, this 2001 Ferrari 360 Modena, represents a real evolution from its predecessor, the 355. And one of the things that's most obvious is the form of the car. It's a really beautiful sort of organic shape, very much harkening back to the 1960s Ferraris.
Yeah, it's sort of a timeless shape. You could put this shape out today and I think it would be contemporary. You know, I like the fact that it's got some curves as opposed to just
angles.
Yeah, angles, even though angles would be evolutionary.
You know, it's absolutely astonishing the way he can catch a connection.
Or lack of same, yeah.
And of course, the heart of every Ferrari is the engine.
Right.
And this is a beautiful example of the wonderful Ferrari V8.
Well, it's amazing how clean it is compared to a modern car where you have air pumps and hoses and big sheets of plastic covering everything, you know?
You can actually see an engine here.
And it's amazing how crude and unfinished it looks compared to modern Ferraris or modern cars. You know, people would not take that unfinished look anymore. Now every part of an automobile has to shine or have polish to it, you know? Which
I love this because, again, it goes back to that whole idea of a competition car being built for purpose.
Right. And you realize it's just angles here. I mean, the welds are beautiful. You see where it's bolted in up there. So obviously you got to unbolt that to get the engine out of here. But yeah, very nice.
It's very, very impressive. And also, to your point, the fact that we think of these cars, obviously you can see how the mid-rear engine configuration really works. this engine is really quite far forward of the rear wheels.
Right.
So you really get that incredible balance that these cars have, which is really something special to behold on the road.
Well, I'm anxious to go for a ride in. Let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I love this car.
Are you driving?
Like. I am driving.
Oh,
You drove the Jolly.
All
I get
right.
to drive this.
it's evolution.
So Jay, this is just like driving in the Jolly. It's another Italian car with the engine mounted behind us.
Right.
So, this is not, however, my vaunted tenuous connection.
You know, the most appealing thing to me about this car is the gated shifter. I mean, to me, that was always such a signature of Ferrari. It was something you immediately bonded with when you got in the car. And the fact that they've done away with it, I don't understand. You know, Porsche and Corvette and a few English manufacturers still make a manual gearbox. And someone who wants a car like this would want the manual gearbox. So I'm always amazed. I mean, in the pursuit of speed and everything else, they've sacrificed some of the soul of the car. And to me, this gated shifter really is a symbol of what the car used to be and what it still should be.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I certainly love the gated shifter. It's iconic. I remember the first time I encountered one, I thought, gosh, how do you actually shift a car like that? Being forced into those areas, and of course, it's simply the visual representation of what's going on beneath the gear lever anyway.
And it literally pushes itself in. Well, this is a pleasing enough shape. It looks contemporary. I mean, this car is 21 years old, yet I think a lot of people who are not car people would believe it was a new Ferrari, don't you?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things that's also very special about the 360. And in our theme of evolution, this of course replaced the F355 Ferrari, and it was a return to the very sort of sensuous shapes that we associate with Ferraris in the 1960s.
Right.
And this wonderful design from Pininfarina. And it also represented a technological advance because this is the first Ferrari built with an aluminum chassis.
Oh, is that right?
The platform of the 355 was steel, so this is the first time they'd actually done an aluminum chassis. So the 360 weighs a lot less than the 355.
You know, it's funny because I think to the average enthusiast, Ferrari represents the pinnacle of technical achievement, but they really are sort of old-fashioned. They wait until things, I mean, one of the last to convert to disc brakes from drum brakes, things like that, just to go to aluminum chassis. I think the thing that got them on their game was the Honda, the NSX. The Honda
certainly.
NSX made Ferrari realize, we got to up our game a little bit here.
That's another thing, two things. First of all, going back to your original statement, Ferrari has always been traditionally a fairly conservative manufacturer when it came to adapting new technologies, especially Enzo, like Ettore Bugatti. If he did something, he'd prefer to refine the old technology as far as it could go before adopting anything new.
Right.
And by the time we get to this car, and Ferrari management is a rather different animal than in the Enzo days. So they're certainly watching the market and also looking towards their F1 program and seeing what they can integrate from the F1 program into the road cars. And it is something that people often wonder, what's the transition and exchange of technology between racing and the street? And Ferrari obviously has always been very connected with racing. And this is also the model which introduced their first single mark racing series, the 360 Challenge.
Right, I remember that, yeah.
They also wanted to make sure that they were reconnecting with sports car racing in a way that they really hadn't since the 1960s in the factory efforts. But going back to the gated shifter, it's a very, very funny thing. We've all gotten used to the paddle shifters these days,
Right.
And again, Ferrari is one of the first manufacturers, interestingly enough, to introduce paddle shifting in their road cars. And they called it the F1 transmission because they were the first ones to take it from Formula One to
Right.
put it into the car. And there were a lot of people that, first of all, thought it was a little odd and slightly disconnected from the driving experience. And when you get to modern cars today with dual clutches, nothing shifts faster or more efficiently than
Right.
paddle shifters with a dual clutch system. But, you know, of course, there is that satisfaction of a manual gearbox of any kind, and especially this one with the gated shifter.
Yeah, like when I go out on the road, I only race myself. You know, I don't try to take on other drivers or get in some dicey thing, because you're just in trouble all the way. You know, one car speeding is maybe a warning. Two cars speeding is racing a reckless drive.
Exactly.
And there is no warning.
It's road racing.
So that's
yeah.
why I always go out by myself. And they go, "Oh, what are you doing?" "Oh, I'm sorry, little." "All right, take it easy." You know, that kind of thing.
Well,
And this is the gearbox that makes it fun. It makes it enjoyable.
It also goes back to something that you mentioned when we were in the Jolly about the satisfaction that you get out of driving at all speeds.
Right.
You know, you don't have to go very fast to get a very satisfying drive.
Right.
And the involvement the driver has with a gearbox like this certainly keeps that entertainment factor in. You know, you drive a fully automatic car. The good thing about the modern paddle shift cars is the fact that you can put them into manual mode, where you are forced to pay attention to the engine revs and what you're doing and matching it to the performance needs of the road you're driving on. But the idea today of the gated shifter or any manual gearbox, it's like naturally aspirated engines versus turbocharged engines. You know, they've made such incredible advances in turbocharging today that nothing like the old days where you had tons of turbo lag and sort of hit the pedal and sort of waited, counted to 10, like, oh! You don't have to worry about that today. So, you know, the people who say, I will only drive a naturally aspirated car, and the people that say, well, I don't really care. To me, it's horses for courses.
Yeah.
I love the effortless power delivery of a turbo car, but there's nothing like the sound of natural aspiration.
Right.
This is a flat plane crank as well, which again is something which is near and dear, the particular sound that the
And what are you
engines like this
talking?
make.
Almost 400 horsepower? Is that
Almost
about
400
right?
horsepower,
Right.
which, as we discussed before, for 2001,
That was yeah.
really healthy. But, you know, this is a car that also, speaking about the NSX, all the manufacturers of supercars and sports cars were really sort of reset with the introduction of the NSX, because all of a sudden, Honda said, here's a car that offers amazing performance, but is also something you can use every day. It's not a sort of a high days and holidays car, you know?
Yeah, but you know what's so funny about that? The flaw in that is, who wants to drive a supercar every day? You know, the idea is, to me, I think that's why the second generation NSX, and I have one, is an excellent car. But the trouble is, when you're not on it, it's a Honda. When you've got it in track mode or sport mode, it's a race car. You know, when I get in my Ford GT, I get in for one reason, just to go have fun, because it's impractical as a car, but as a fun vehicle to have a good time with. Oh, it's just wonderful, you know.
You're not going to pack up for a weekend away in the Ford GT.
Right, exactly.
The other thing that I really do like about the 360 Modena is that classic look through the windshield.
Right.
With the wonderfully sculpted fenders that you can see.
Yeah.
You know, in modern cars, basically the view drops off after the windshield, and you've got the road ahead. But here you're reminded you're in the middle of the car, which I think is a wonderful feeling. This car is a 2001. It's 21 years old.
Right.
So the choice between this car and a new McLaren is, what do you want for the driving experience? Because this offers a more, dare I say, vintage driving experience than the McLaren, which is a very, very capable car.
Right.
But this is a totally different level of involvement than you'd have in the McLaren. And, you know, I often like to express it in this way. You know, it's 1984. Porsche is making the 911 SC. A 356C is a 20-year-old used car.
Right.
and they offered very, very different driving experiences, both very true to the Porsche brand. So I think that this is a fun Ferrari that still has this great sort of tie back to the 1960s romance of Ferraris with the styling and the gated shifter, and it's really a more vintage experience. New vintage. Car handles really well.
It does. I can feel it.
Yeah.
Dampening suspension have come a long way in 20 years.
Oh yes.
When you hit a bump, it's a kidney punch. But other than that, it feels very tight.
Yeah. Very responsive.
Yeah.
This car has got wider than normal wheels and tires, which slightly changed the dynamic of it.
What would have been the competitor to this in 2001? There was
2001, the Porsche 911.
Porsche 911.
The Aston. This is the Aston V8 Vantage.
Yeah.
The Bentley's not really a competitor for this car.
No, Bentley's not a competitor. Was there a Lamborghini? No.
The Lamborghini, the Lamborghini Gallardo.
I guess the Gallardo was around in 2001. Yeah.
This whole generation of usable, practical, high-performance cars. And people do talk a lot about the NSX, but we do have to give Porsche credit too, because the 911 was really sort of an all-rounder that people didn't generally buy as a toy. I remember for years, as an appraiser, I would regularly appraise 911s with very high mileage that were fairly newish cars.
Well, it was a badge of honor, wasn't it?
Exactly. And I would appraise at the same time Ferraris of the same age that had almost no miles on them. Today it seems to be reversed. People are buying a lot of the high-performance special Porsches and parking them and buying the Ferraris and driving them.
That's funny.
So it's a really interesting thing the way these things all come around. So the evolution of the 355 into the 360 really marked the turn for Ferrari in so many levels. And although it may be slightly tenuous, I think that the transition of Anglesea from French Second Empire to colonial revival very successfully merges the two styles in a way that you might not think possible. So we'll see in the third car in our group where this is taken again to the next level. And I think you'll really feel it behind the wheel and in the driver's seat. So our third car today, Jay, is this 2022 Lamborghini Huracan STO, Super Trofeo Omologata.
Right.
Say that 3 times fast.
That's the way you're ordering from the appetizer menu. I'm just gonna have a cheese pizza. That's fine. No, this is an amazing car.
The ultimate evolution of the Huracan, the last of the models before it's replaced.
Right.
And one that, we look at a lot of carbon fiber on cars. Now, carbon fiber is sort of like an accessory, like a wristwatch or a ring. And to see carbon fiber that's working for a living is really great. That's what this car is all about.
It's interesting. To me, I could lose all the decals and stuff. I think the shape is exciting enough on its own without adding, Jim Crackery to it. It just seems rather silly to me. To me, this in a nice gray or a solid blue would be fabulous. I mean, it's a fabulous car anyway. I could just lose all of this. I mean,
it's interesting that you talk about that, though. Thinking about the Lamborghini brand personality, it's always been sort of up front. And you think about the great colors that the Miura came in, the wonderful orange and the bright green.
Well, they called those safety colors back in the day.
So you could see a fast car coming.
Yeah, that was the idea, really. The Day-Glow orange, and all the American manufacturers, especially Chrysler with the Scat Pack and all those kind of things. But the nice thing is everything's functional. These scoops right here on the hood, these are there to pull cooling air through, for the brakes. So there's nothing on it that you don't need, except the blue dots and stuff. That's the only part you don't need to me. But yeah, and this is the best car Lamborghini builds. It is, you know, it's a classic case of just keep refining a product until it's perfect. And this is the final incarnation, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
It's a lot lighter. It's rear-wheel drive, not four-wheel drive. It has all the features I like. Yeah, it's a terrific car.
And it's also wonderful to think of the fact that as the last iteration of the model, it's not a cynical marketing thing with just a new name and a couple of decals and you go, but a really substantial advance and evolution, if you were,
right,
on the Huracan Performante.
And it's all functional. For example, the doors open in the traditional way. You don't need the thing coming up and all, which gets you a lot of attention and stuff.
And I also love that door handle. The door handle is just like the door handles in those wonderful 1940s and 50s Italian cars.
And you've got a pull strap here for the door, rather than a door handle mechanism with all its, you know, various metal
when you're
pieces.
building a performance car, you think about weight and the incremental weight of all those little things. I mean, no carpeting. It's a really amazing car for what it appears to be.
Right.
And dynamically on the road.
I guess what you can say is the performance back up the looks. There's so many cars that look fast, but this is a little disappointing. This is completely the opposite. You expect it to be a little sort of flashy, but then you realize, no, it's there for a reason. It really does it well.
Let's show everyone exactly what this car is all about.
Yeah, we can't make it do what it's supposed to do here, but, well, we can try.
We'll get close.
You know, it's funny to me that the best car Lamborghini makes is not the most expensive or rarest. It's this Hurricane STO, is that what they call it?
STO, Super Trofeo Omologata.
V10, rear-wheel drive. Why anybody choose an Aventador over this? It's more compact, it's smaller, it's tighter. I'm guessing it's equally as fast. I think on a road course it might even be faster.
Absolutely.
I mean, with a professional driver.
And Jay, we talked about evolution, and this is the ultimate street performance evolution of the Huracan based on their STO, the Super Trofeo one-mark race series, like the Ferrari Challenge and the Porsche Cup, and also their GT3 racer that they have in FIA GT racing.
So we're looking at what, about 600 horsepower here?
This is about 600 horsepower and extensive use of carbon fiber. The entire front panel is carbon fiber, and there's a lot of weight saving that has gone.
A lot of weight saving. You got these door pulls instead. You got carbon fiber doors.
No carpeting, just flat panels of carbon fiber on the floor, the doors.
Yeah. You're probably, what, about 300 pounds less than a standard Huracan?
Absolutely.
Like that? Yeah. Well, you can really feel the difference.
Yes.
I mean, not in this short drive. I've driven this car before, so I am very impressed with it. This is my favorite Lamborghini because I could lose the outside graphics and all of that. Just in terms of performance and drivability, this is a car that really does shrink around you. It seems big and wide when you're looking at it. So once you get inside, it seems compact and tight, but there's more than enough room. I mean,
plenty of room. I can stretch my legs out.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of these. I don't know if these are Recaro seats or not, but the race seats are just too tight and too uncomfortable. But other than that,
well, there I'll challenge you a bit. Not that we ever disagree.
Right.
I do have a very strong feeling about overly aggressive sport seats.
Right.
These I think are just right. The sort of the Mama Bear, Papa Bear, middle bear seats. They hold you very firmly in place, but I don't feel like my kidneys are being punched in it.
Well, I think Baby Bear would sit in the feet fine. Papa Bear here is a little scrunched, you know. So yeah. Papa Bear and Baby Bear do not have the same buttockle area. So if your buttockle area is anything average size, it's probably going to seem a bit. But, you know, this is a car I could drive for hours and hours.
Yes.
You know, some cars, I mean, I like the Ferrari, I like the way it handled, but you could see 20 years as a big time, a long time in automobile evolution. And suspension has come so far. I mean, the Ferrari handled wonderfully, but when you hit a bump, boy, it felt like a kidney punch, you know. And that might have to do with the high mileage, almost 60,000 miles on it. So I might not be fair there. But
it's also very interesting because this car, I generally have a beef with a lot of track day / road cars.
Right.
And this is clearly a high performance car. You've got it in Trofeo mode, which is the sporting mode.
Right.
And the roads here are not the smoothest.
Right.
You feel every bump, but it immediately rebounds from that bump. You don't feel like you're being jarred, which is really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, my hat's off to the chassis engineers on this. They
It
really did it
does
right.
feel like it's solid billet.
Yes.
It feels like it's one piece. You don't get, you know, in the old days, the dashboard would be doing this. You know,
you hear these little creaks everywhere.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true. You know, heat rising off the back and all of that.
Now this car does put out a lot of heat.
It does put out a lot of heat, but it controls it well.
Yes.
I've never seen the gauge get pinned or anything like that. Maybe on a track, but I mean, there's almost no road around here you can do justice to this car.
Absolutely not.
Because this really is a high performance car. This is a car where, you know, 100 feels like 40 miles an hour.
And yet, it still has a very lively feel about it in town that doesn't make you think, oh my God, if I can only get rid of that car in front of me, I just have, you know.
And what does this have? Twin turbos on this?
It's twin turbo.
Yeah,
yes.
twin turbo. But you know, it does feel like a normally aspirated car. I mean, the turbo is so well managed. I mean, sometimes turbo lag can be great fun with that with a whoosh and that as soon as you hit
the slingshot.
Like I've got one of those very early Yanko Stinger Corvairs. The turbocharger with no wastegate, and you're fine. You hit $4,000 and whoa, you feel a little, not a huge kick in the butt, but you know, you can tell something's happening back there. And it makes it sort of fun and entertaining. The steering, is this electric? Because it's very good.
It is electric, but one of the things that, again, the car is so much of a piece. You know, people talk in Formula One about the package. You know, it's not the fact that it's lighter, that adds to it. Not the fact that the suspension is so well tuned, that adds to it. Not just the steering, it's everything put together. They really thought about how they wanted the car to feel.
Well, this is the best car Lamborghini builds, and I think it's their best seller too.
It's interesting to see what they follow this with, because this STO is sort of the last of the Huracans. They're replacing the car next year with something. It's going to have to be awfully good to beat this.
Yeah, I mean, this is very, very good. It really is. I like it when the best car is not the most expensive car. It's not driven by money. Sometimes a design and an engine all come together, you know. This doesn't need 12 cylinders. It does it on 10.
It doesn't need 1,000 horsepower.
It doesn't need 1,000 horsepower. I mean, I contend most people could not make this car do what it's capable of doing.
Absolutely not.
So it'll always be entertaining to you. You know, that's sort of the fun part about having the F1 McLaren. I'll never take it to its limits because I'm not good enough. But I can do it far enough that it scares me. You know?
Well, you know, and another thing is that a car like this, like the F1 certainly, also flatters a driver. It certainly flatters me.
Right.
Because you feel more confident about what you're doing because you know the car can handle it.
Right.
And yes, I guess in the hands of a Yahoo, you can get into trouble very easily.
Yeah.
There's some very famous McLaren F1 owners who have wrecked their cars numbers of times.
But I liked it. It's two-wheel drive because, again, the fun of two-wheel drive is an exit, you give it a little gas, you feel the tail step out a bit, you know, which is very entertaining and fun and not crazy dangerous. You're not doing impossible things with it. You know, with a four-wheel drive high-performance car, boy, when you lose it, boy, that's going to be bad.
The limits of adhesion in a four-wheel drive high-performance car are so high.
So high that if you break them, I mean, okay, that's it. You're off the, you know.
And, you know, I think you spend more time with new cars than I do. But I think that both of us are fundamentally old car guys.
Right.
And for me, the characteristics that I like in this car, that I feel in this car, even as a passenger, are sort of old car characteristics.
Right.
You could hop out of a Miura and into this and say, oh, I'm in the Lamborghini.
Right, yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of, obviously, cars that came in between that don't necessarily have this sort of active feel that the early Lamborghinis had, certainly. I feel like this is sort of a direct link between, you know, the 350, the 400 GT, the Miura, the Espada, and this, sort of,
Well, you know, the
forget a
Miura
lot
is
of
funny.
things
The
about it.
Miura is a great car to drive swiftly.
Mm-hmm.
It's a frightening car to drive fast. Because, and it makes a far better classic than it did a new car. Because the fun of the Miura is you've got the engine right here. I mean, you can look right here and see the carburetors right behind, and you can hear it, you know, gasping for air, and you know, I mean, it's a lot of fun to drive. The whole symphony of moving the stick and all of that. If you were to race, well, you'd just be far behind because it's a bit, you know, you can't rush it. You don't really slam shit.
Absolutely.
It's rev match, you go through, and so there's a whole symphony of sounds that you really enjoy. Hearing the carburetors, hearing the gear whine, hearing all of that. And when you're just racing by yourself, it's the most entertaining car in the world. To me, it's probably the world's best classic sports car to drive quickly.
It is
Swiftly.
It is a point that you bring up that I think is incredibly valuable for people to think about. The way we use the cars.
Yeah.
You know, you can look at cars on paper, which people frequently do with new cars, and just read the numbers and say, well, this is what this car is, which doesn't really tell you anything about the actual experience of using it.
Right.
And to your point, we will not exploit today the maximum performance available in a car like the Miura, which people did in its time.
Right.
And it's also a matter of, you know, like an early Porsche 911, a short wheelbase 911, or the first 930 turbos. You really had to know what you were doing to extract the performance.
These are the sort of roads that would have driven the car on in Italy. You know,
the nice
2-lane roads, nicely paved.
Softly unwind.
Yeah.
They're nice sweepers.
This dual clutch gearbox is wonderful. Again,
Yes.
This has the best gearbox of any Lamborghini. You know, the Aventador still has the old
Single clutch.
single clutch or torque converter transfer, whatever they call it. Yeah, it does that, you know, all that kind of thing.
Which some people say gives an element of action in the driving experience.
Yeah, but you know, when you buy a vehicle like this, you're looking for science. You're looking for provision. You know. The thing I love about the P1 McLaren is it's so seamless, and this is seamless.
Yeah.
You hit the gas for a minute, things happen right now.
The brakes, of course, are spectacular.
Yeah, brakes are spectacular.
It is, I think, a really a very effective example of taking high-performance elements and really making them work in a way that you can feel and see. You know, I've had lots of conversations about carbon fiber, and carbon fiber uses a decorative device, which I guess is better than putting wood in new cars, since that doesn't make much sense.
Right.
But, you know, I prefer working carbon fiber.
Yeah. And I like it. It's not a prima donna car. This is a car they put spikes on it and they go ice racing with it.
Right.
You know? And they do all kind of those kind of things because they can.
Exactly.
You know, it's not so low you're ripping off the splitter all the time. You can raise or lower the front end.
Exactly. It's got that ride height adjustment. And ice cold air conditioning.
Yeah.
In a high performance car.
Well,
you know,
the great thing about Audi having Lamborghini now is you get the German precision with the Italian style. You know what I mean? And that's a great combination, rather than the other way around.
I think just as we drove that A6 a while back, I think it's really been a great two-way street, because a lot of the performance and packaging that Lamborghini is very good at has actually also been seen in Audi cars as well. I think it's been a great exchange. And I think it's one of the things that we've said this before, the Volkswagen Group has really been terrific brand stewards. They manage to share the things that you need to share and want to share without diluting the individual character of the brand. I think that's a thing that takes a lot of effort and attention to.
Actually, you know, you get used to these seats. When you sit them initially, they seem harder and tight, but
I knew you'd come around.
It's not so bad now. But well, the fun thing about this is you could drive this New York to Florida if you wanted to.
Well, it has no luggage space.
Well, yeah, well, you have somebody
have to-
follow you with the luggage, of course.
or you ship it ahead.
Well, it's just the idea that, you know, I'm old enough to remember, that means I'm really old, when a man could last longer than the car, you know?
Yes.
When they would, you know, in the 30s, you could drive this car for 6 hours straight, you know? That was like, oh, wow, nothing happened. And, you know what I mean, though?
Exactly. Yes. You didn't have a flat. You didn't boil
Right,
over.
right,
you know.
right.
You didn't have to adjust the valves.
Traditional sports cars, one would never go on a cross-country tour with, or anything, because they just wouldn't make it. They were finicky. You had to do the Italian tune-up. You know, you get it out on the highway and keep it floored until you hit 100. You know, to get everything going.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Go to the red line and beyond.
Yeah.
Capable performance.
Yeah.
That's
right.
this car's all about. And
We got one of those stupid things in front of us.
Yep.
Okay.
and to tie up in a nice little ribbon my beautifully untenuous theme of connection, of evolution.
Right.
You can really see how the Huracan, which is basically a really good platform, has been taken to a totally new level, combining the best of the street Huracan has introduced to the performance versions and the racing versions.
Well, let's see what you'll do.